Hey everybody, this is Father Warner. We are in the fifth week of Lent. Next Sunday, by the way, is Palm Sunday. The text of today, the first reading is taken from Jeremiah chapter 31, verses 31 to 34. I'm not going to do that text, even though I'm very inclined to. It speaks of the tremendous love of God. But I'm going to focus on John chapter 12, verses 20 to 30. And I recommend that you read the entire text of John chapter 12 because especially the text of today, has several layers. People coming to see Jesus, Jesus teaching us there are three different teachings in it. But I'm going to unpack it all for you in this teaching. It might be a little long. Bear with me, but I can assure you, you are going to really enjoy this teaching of today. So I want to say right away, and this is the title of my teaching, that we don't serve a cause, we serve a cross. Now, coming to the text of today, when you look at the Gospel of John, it has 21 chapters. We are in chapter 12, and in chapter 12, Jesus enters into Jerusalem. So it's just about a little more than half of the Gospel of John. Now compare this, Jesus' triumphant entry into Jerusalem, somewhere midway into the Gospel of John, with Matthew, Mark and Luke. These three are called the Synoptic Gospels. Synoptic means to see together. They're very similar. So in Matthew, Mark and Luke, Jesus enters Jerusalem somewhere towards, the 3/4 part of the Gospel of Matthew, Mark and Luke. Not in the case of John. It is just somewhere at the halfway mark of his Gospel. Now, in the text of today, Jesus is in the temple. It is Palm Sunday. Chapter 12 begins by telling us that it is 6 days before the Passover that he arrives. In the Gospel of John, chapter 13, after he enters into Jerusalem, Jesus will wash the feet of his disciples. And from chapter 13 to chapter 18, Jesus is going to have a private discourse, a private teaching, which is called the farewell discourse. This is a private teaching. So, what does that make the text of today? It makes it the last public teaching of Jesus, okay? And that's what we're hearing, his last public words in the Gospel of John. Now, so far what's happened? In chapter 11, Jesus has raised Lazarus from the dead. See, this is not to be misunderstood as the resurrection of Lazarus, yeah? This is the resuscitation. He's given life again. Lazarus will die, Lazarus will be raised again. So, the raising of Lazarus has caused the Jewish religious authorities to really get mad. Now, you might think that, they're mad enough, by the way, to even plot his death. The chief priest says it's better for one man to die for the nation than the whole nation to be destroyed. And you might think like, okay, this is the case of sour grapes. They are the whole, in chapter 12, we are in verse 20 onwards, but read chapter 12, verse 19, and the Pharisees say, look, the whole world is after him. The whole world has gone after him. So you might get the impression that this is a matter of sour grapes, They're all jealous of Jesus and they're upset with Jesus, and so they want to kill him. But it's not as simplistic as, we may make it sound. There were genuine problems. Of course, I don't justify them killing Jesus, but they had their own fears, which they were trying to address. And let me explain. You see, the Jews, the people of Israel, lived under Roman occupation. The Romans were their overlords. And even the chief priest was appointed by the Romans. Now, the Jews could carry on business as usual, carry on business in the temple, carry on matters of faith, as long as they did not upset the Romans. So the chief priests were worried. Here is Jesus entering, people hailing him as the Messiah. Some might have even thought, this is a time ripe for revolution. And the chief priests were worried because a small spark could set off the Jews and even more set off the Romans, who would come down on Jerusalem with all its might. And we know this happened finally in 70 AD when the Romans came and destroyed the temple of Jerusalem and destroyed the city of Jerusalem permanently. That's why till today we have no temple in Jerusalem. You just have one outer wall. So coming to the text of today, we are told that some Greeks come to Jesus. Now, it's not unusual. Jesus was always approached even by Gentiles. But you might say, well, what were the Greeks doing in Jerusalem? Well, they came. The temple was beautiful. We know that even in the temple, the outermost court was called the court of the Gentiles. This is where all the trading took place. Only Jews were then permitted to enter into the court of men and women, and then only the priests into the Holy of Holies. So the Greeks come to Jesus. They come actually to Philip. Philip brings them to Andrew. Andrew brings them to Jesus. And the scriptures do not tell us at all whether Jesus met them or not. But it prompted Jesus to begin his last public teaching. Now, you will remember that at Cana, Jesus said these words. He said this to his mother. He said, "Woman, my hour has not yet come." But in the text of today, in chapter 12, verse 23, Jesus begins this last public teaching by saying, this is the hour when the Son of Man will be glorified. Okay? Now, when we think of glory, when you and I think of glory, I don't think suffering comes to mind. It is in that sense, it's very futile to approach this text when you hear of Jesus' glory. It's futile to approach this text with human eyes. You have to see it from the mind of God. So you and I would see glory in terms of crowns and castles. Jesus saw glory as winning the favor of God through a crown of thorns and by doing the will of his Father, by embracing his cross. Now, I want to focus on this will of the Father because this is how Jesus saw glory, by doing the will of his Father. And that's when he begins to teach. So the will of the Father is achieved through humility and obedience. And he teaches that today. Unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, humility and obedience. The will of the Father is also seen in becoming nothing in the eyes of man so that we might become something in the eyes of God. That's also doing the will of the Father. And then, of course, Jesus says that when we do the will of the Father, we hate our own life. Don't misunderstand this. Somebody will say, why should I hate my life? In biblical exegesis, remember Jesus also says, right? He says, unless you hate father and mother. When you translate that word, hate really translates as to love less. So unless you love your father and mother less, unless you love your life less, and you love your life less in order to love God more, and that is also doing the will of the Father. So as I said, we don't serve a cause. You and I serve the cross. And that is, and when we do that, we do the will of the Father. So Jesus Christ now speaks of his hour of glory. And that hour of glory took him to the cross. That hour of glory nailed him to a cross. But Jesus made an instrument of shame. Remember the cross in Deuteronomy said, "Cursed be the man who dies upon the cross." So he took an instrument of shame and he turned it into an instrument of glory. Now you and I often wear a cross around our neck. I don't have one. I have a little chain here gifted to me by someone. But I used to wear a cross, and each time I wear a cross, I realize somebody looks at it and says, "Father, that's beautiful." And I just take it off and I give it to them. I've done this several times. I know you're admiring this gold chain now, but I've done this several times. I've given away, the last one I gave to a priest. Father Clarence gave me a cross on my birthday, beautiful one. And then, I won't tell you who, but another priest came to me with great suffering in his life. And I mean a sinful suffering. And I just took out the cross and put it around his neck. And I know he wears it as his permanent protection. I've given away many such crosses. But you and I wear a cross. And the point I'm making is that cross is not an ornamentation. That cross that you and I wear, and we should wear it, is a cross that's an advertisement that we share in the glory of Jesus, in his suffering, in his pain. Thank you for watching. I know this has been a little longer than you expect, and I must tell you, I had to record this 5 times because each time there was a call that kept coming in. I want to make a request. Please don't call me. Send me a WhatsApp message. I will respond to you as soon as I can. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, share this teaching, like it, and leave your comments. And I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye for now.